This program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with Eau Claire County. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to call this meeting of the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors to order here on September 19th, 2017. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of reflection by Supervisor David Mortimer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In early 1796, President George Washington decided not to seek election after 3 terms. He began thinking about writing a farewell address to the American people. He asked Alexander Hamilton for help. Today, September 19, is the anniversary of the publication of Washington's farewell address. The 32-page handwritten document marked 20 years of Washington's service to the new nation. It is considered to be one of the most important documents in American history. The writing of Washington's farewell address is dramatized in the Broadway musical Hamilton by Lin-Manuel Miranda in the song One Last Time. The dialogue in the song described Washington's decision not to run as president. This was uncharted territory. Since Washington was the first president, this event introduced America for the first time to the practice of a peaceful and orderly transition between administrations. In the Broadway musical, Washington asks Hamilton to write his final address. He wants to discuss his philosophy of governance and the importance of knowing how to say goodbye. When the scene opens and Washington shocks Hamilton by saying he's not going to run, Hamilton says, "Mr. President, they will say you're weak. No, they will say we're strong." Hamilton, "Your position is so unique, so I'll use it to move them along." Hamilton, "Why do you have to say goodbye?" Washington, "If I say goodbye, the nation learns to move on. It outlives me when I'm gone. Like the scripture says, everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one of them shall be made afraid. They'll be safe in the nation we've made. I want to sit under my own vine and fig tree, a moment alone in the shade, at home in this nation we've made, one last time." In the musical, in the second half of the song includes actual excerpts from the text of Washington's farewell address. Hamilton reads the draft as Washington sings the same words to a melody. In Hamilton the musical, the reference to everyone sitting under their own vine and fig tree and not being afraid is an ancient Hebrew blessing. It's a prophetic vision of the New Jerusalem found in Micah 4:4. To understand this image, you need to know it takes many years of careful cultivation to grow figs or grapes. These are not annual crops like corn or soybeans. The image conveys a farm setting of stability, advanced planning, the reward of long-laid plans, and enjoyment of the fruits of one's labor. Washington quoted Micah because in the opening chapters, the Jewish prophet paints a beautiful picture of the New Jerusalem in a heaven and a new earth. Washington used this phrase from the Bible because it evoked for him ownership of private property and agrarian prosperity. It was a metaphor of freedom from want, freedom from war, and from the fear of war. In fact, the verse right before talks about beating swords into plowshares, and talks about the time that there is no more war. We have to remember that in Washington's day, most Americans were first, second, even third generation immigrants from Western European countries where church and state were one. It was not uncommon for some states to draw upon the church baptismal records and call up compulsory names to draft for war or impose taxes and pass off funds to church leaders. Religious persecution was common if you did not align with the state official religion. Many of the earliest Americans had had enough of European governments and corruption and wanted to be left alone. Washington used this picture of every man under his own vine and fig tree as shorthand for his beloved Mount Vernon. It wasn't only Washington who held this view. The late historian Pauline Maier, in describing the Declaration of Independence memorable phrase, "The pursuit of happiness," wrote the following: "For Jefferson and his contemporaries, happiness no doubt demanded safety or security, which would have been in keeping with the biblical phrase one colonist after another used to describe the good life, to be at peace under their vine and fig tree, with none of them made afraid." Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Mortimer. If supervisors would please take your keypads and indicate your presence here this evening. Okay, we have 26 present. We have a quorum. We'll move on to approval of the journal of proceedings from August 15th. You'll find that on pages 4 to 8 of your meeting packet. Are there any suggested changes to the journal of proceedings as drafted? I see no suggestions. I'd look for a motion to approve as drafted. Motion by Supervisor Mortimer, second by Supervisor DeLuca. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Moving on to public comment. This is an opportunity at each meeting for members of the public to address the board on any topics that they would like to speak about. And we don't have anyone signed up. I'll ask if there's anyone from the public who would like to speak this evening. I don't see anyone, so okay, we'll move on to presentations. And we'll start with Sean Lentz from our municipal bond advisor with Ellers and Associates. Good evening and welcome. Thank you for your assistance.
Oops. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sean Lentz with Ellers, and what I'm going to go through with the county board this evening is the finance plan for the 2017 general obligation promissory notes to finance the capital projects. Had a meeting last week. Make sure we got this on here. Oh, Amy, I think I.
Yes, and Amy Wong is here, also our finance director.
Yep. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. She may need to log in. Okay.
Oh, that's okay. Okay. Thank you, Amy. Up on the screen, it'll be a little bit difficult to see, but what we've got on there is the proposed repayment schedule for the 2017 note issue. And we discussed this with the Finance Committee last week. The projects that are included in this year's financing, which totals $9,750,000, are highway improvement projects as well as other capital improvements that were in the budget constructed in 2016 and the year that we're working currently in right now, 2017. The amortization schedule for this debt issue will have it be paid back over a 10-year period. And starting with this year's budget for next year's payment, the additional debt is estimated, and our interest rates are about 25 basis points or 1/4% over what we're seeing in the current market right now. So we're hoping that the bids will come in lower than what you see in the handout. But the estimated debt service is about $1,080,000 a year to completely pay this $9,750,000 issue off over a 10-year period. A second chart that we included in the pre-sale report was to update the county board on where the county sits in terms of your use of general obligation debt as compared to the limitation that the state statutes have on using general obligation debt. You as a county are able to issue general obligation debt, which is the full faith and credit of the county. So it's the best security you can offer to the market when you issue debt. You are, though, limited to 5% of the equalized value of the county. So your borrowing capacity is just over $400 million that you would be able to issue. And as you can see, that's represented on the red line up on the screen on the chart. Where you are at as a county, inclusive of the proposed new issue, is closer to approximately 80 million in debt outstanding. And then the blue bars that you see on the chart represent the gradual repayment of existing debt plus this proposed new issue. All of the county's existing debt, as currently structured, be paid back by 2031. That's the last payment date that you have on your outstanding debt. So as you can see, the county has used this tool very conservatively, and you certainly have a lot of capacity still at your disposal. The other form that we like to review the debt situation with the county board, and we did with the finance committee last week, is what does this mean in terms of the impact on the repayment of the principal and interest of the debt each year, in terms of where you are at currently and where you'll be with the proposed new $9,750,000 issue. So the chart on the screen here, the blue bars are representative of the existing debt that the county currently has issued from 2016 and earlier, and the green bars on top of the blue are representative of the new proposed issue being paid back over the next 10 years. And where I would highlight this is for this year's budget, and by this year I mean 16 into 17, the debt payments were just below $8 million total for principal and interest on all the debt that the county has outstanding. And next year with the proposed new issue, that'll be going up about $1,080,000, as I'd mentioned. So we'll be just below or right around $9 million in principal and interest that will need to be in the county's budget for the repayment of the debt that you have outstanding. Okay. The timeline, tonight there's an initial resolution for review by the county board. Approval of the initial resolution starts the issuance process. I've already been working with staff, particularly Amy, on preparing the offering document that will go out to prospective investors. Amy and I and Catherine will be meeting with Moody's Investor Service to update the county's bond rating, which I'm happy to note is currently AA1, which is just one step below the very best rating you could have, which is AAA. And then following those steps, we would be coming back to your October 3rd meeting, I believe, with the bids that we received the morning of the 3rd. And then those bids will be presented to the county board that evening for your approval. And at that time, if you're satisfied with the winning bid, we would lock into the interest rate and the final terms at that point. So number of steps I went through this evening, but before being done with my presentation, if there's any questions that the county board would have, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Thank you, Sean. Any questions for Sean? Holy cow. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Any questions for Sean this evening? I know finance, as noted, was working with them, so. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate the presentation. Next, Diane Cable, presenting on integration of the Children's Court Services into the Department of Human Services. And Rob Fadness, oh, there's Rob. Yeah. So Rob and Diane, so welcome to the two of you.
go, success. Good evening, everyone. I'm Diane Cable, and I'm the director at Human Services.
And I'm Rob Badness, and I don't know what I am.
So this is a brief presentation. You have heard about the integration of the Children's Court Services over the course of the last almost year and a half now, and we're here to give you our final update on this. So Human Services, our focus in 2017, one of the items was the integration process with the Children's Court Services, along with our focus on the creation and implementation of the Behavioral Health Division and working on becoming a trauma-informed organization. All of those focuses are interconnected with each other. But we're here tonight to just give you the update on our integration process. So the process involved initially a number of different steps. We started off with Rob and Tom Worth and I having just a conversation about the possibility of integration and what that could look like. And we agreed that this was in the best interests of the children, youth, families, and community of Eau Claire County. We also agreed that in doing so, this would be a collaborative process. We were pretty intentional with not using the word merger because integration sounds more friendly. And this was about Rob and myself and our two departments working together to be able to move forward. And so from that initial discussion, we then began to meet with other folks. We met with Catherine as the county administrator, our juvenile court judge, and then we began to talk to our respective committees and governing boards. And then in November, you remember last year, you as a board, a county board, you passed and approved the resolution for us to move forward with this integration process. And then in April, we began as with a team of folks from both of our departments, because imagine this, we are kind of different. And we both worked really, really hard, but we didn't always work as well together as we knew that we could. And so we needed to do some work in understanding who each of us are and how to be able to successfully work together so that we would have a successful integration. And thus began our process with the organizational effectiveness process. And we had some external facilitators, Vicki Tilka, who is the director at Marathon County Social Services, and Todd Romanesco, who is the county administrator for Calumet County, along with the professional development system, helped us through that process over the course of 8 different meetings. It was several months. And through that, we began to formulate trust, understanding of each other's roles, so that we could begin with that integration process. And so successfully, about a week ago, we had staff move to some new offices within the department, and it went very smooth. 4 offices were moved within 2 hours of time, which is pretty miraculous sometimes, and folks being able to be really successful, and that's coordinating with IS, with maintenance, and a lot of different folks. And we've begun looking at then how do we practice and work with our children, youth, and families in other ways, in new ways. The full integration and operations will occur technically with the passage of the budget for the 2018 budget, as the Children's Court Services Department is now part of the Human Services Department in our 2018 budget. But it's still an ongoing process because it is our job to be able to always be looking at how we can best be providing our services to children, youth, and families. So with that, whoops, what did I do? Hang on a minute. Human Services, as you know, has 6 division areas, and one of those is the Children and Family Services area, and this is the area that the Children's Court Services work and staff falls under. Rob's going to talk a little bit about what that formation looked like pre-integration and then now with the integration.
Before, and it will be brief, but before I get going, I'd like to make sure that I personally and acknowledge and thank Diane for the work that she's done. You know, it's typical of a true leader that you give everybody else credit except yourself. And this integration process, which we're in the middle of, getting to the front end, working through the transition with the move and so on, literally not only never would have happened, but clearly never would have happened as smoothly and as organized as it did without Diane's leadership. So I acknowledge that. Thank you very much. And I'm excited to see what we have in the next stage. What you see is probably I won't say the biggest, but maybe the two obvious changes to the department and the Children's Court Services Department through the integration. It's kind of hard to see, but on the left, basically we have the Children's Court Services organization before the merger. We had a director, we had a manager, and a 180 program coordinator, and it was really kind of all a linear hierarchy. Everybody fell under me, and then everybody under Al, and then everybody else under Casey. What we did, and really what kind of the current thinking is that there shouldn't be that many people under one person. There should be a separation of specific duties under people that have specialties in those areas. And by moving through the integration, that's what we get. We have a family services unit that is the overarching umbrella of everything juvenile. And then under the security detention services, I would be the superintendent and then have supervision of security detention and the 180 program. The bigger change is under the youth services, where the intake workers move from under my supervision to the youth services supervisor, Carol Krabik. So we end up with two separate organizational groups supervised by people that have a specialty in the area that they're supervising. That's the big draw for this this first change. It's only a start. We have to tackle the on-call process, which is a big one. We have to tackle some training issues, but first and foremost, I think we mastered the biggest hurdle, which was to relocate a certain number of Children's Court Services personnel to the Department of Human Services. And as soon as we did that, people can now start the business of learning their new jobs, new specialties, new offices, new coworkers, new way of doing business. And like I said, so far it's gone virtually problem-free.
So lastly, we can say we're integrated. We still have a lot of work to do. As Rob was saying, there's training, there's looking at practice, but this has all been based on outcomes, improvements, compliance with standards and law, enhancement to how we work, efficiencies. But one of the things that I remember in first meeting with Rob about this topic is he said, yeah, let's do this, but I'll only do this if our focus has stayed on those we serve, on those kids, youth, and families. And he has done that, and I think that we have done that well together. So with that, we thank you for your support in this process. I thank Rob for his years as a in his role as overseeing the whole Children's Court Department, but also now excited with our new adventure as we move forward. Later this evening, you will have a resolution that's going to talk about changing of titles, and it is for changing Rob's title from the Children's Court Services Director to the Children's Court Services Manager. And so we hope that you will support that effort as we continue to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Any questions for Rob or Diane before we take off? Let's see. Thank you. Appreciate it. And Josh Peterson, welcome Josh, Parks and Forest Director with his annual report. You'll be using a laptop too, should we keep the lights on? Okay.
There we go. All right, guys. I'm back. It seems like it's been a while. This is a report for our 2016 accomplishments. First off, the first slide here, just going over our mission statement, which was revised here a few years ago. You guys can read it there. I think it's important that it also touches on the importance of managing the forest sustainably for timber, but also keeping in mind the recreational components and wildlife and watershed management. And that's what we do. We have 52,000 plus acres of county forest land here in Eau Claire County, which ranks us 15th in the state for the county forest systems, which is right in the middle as there's 29 county forests. Our department manages 7 county parks, 3 county dams, the snowmobile trail system and ATV trails, as well as cross-country ski trails at 4 locations and other recreational opportunities out there, as well as the Expo Center, which has been under our management here for 3 years now. Besides our staff, we also work with a lot of different organizations throughout the community, different user groups. You can see on the list there that there's probably 15 or so that we work with on a pretty regular basis. And all these groups have been really great to work with and help make our park system much better than it could be with just the county staff. So we'll talk a little bit about timber revenue, because I know that's always a topic you guys are interested in. You can see that in 2016 was our 3rd year in a row that timber sale revenue topped $1 million gross. Last year it was 1.2 million, which is a little bit down from the previous 2 years. You see 14 was our record high year of 1.46, then we were at 1.45. So we were down a little bit, but still trending well above that $1 million mark. And you can see from the previous 10 years, it typically been in the $400,000 to $700,000 range. So that's a good sign, and we're doing well again this year. With the timber program, that also does provide severance payments to the townships, which I know the townships are always glad to get those checks. And you can see at the very bottom there, last year we provided about $182,000 to the townships out of the 15% severance tax. So that's a nice relationship that we have with the townships, and we work very closely with them on a lot of our logging projects. One of the big projects that kind of started off 2016 and actually started in 15 was the repair work at the Altoona Dam. You can see from the pictures here that the first picture on the left-hand side is of pier work that was on the up river side of the dam, and then on the back side of the dam is the picture on the right, where we had to have work done on both sides of the dam. That was a very large project, a very expensive project. I think the final tally on the expense on that project was around $500,000. We did have cost sharing on the municipal dam grant program, which provided about 50% cost share on that. But That dam is currently working great. All the repairs have held well and it's in good shape. So it is due to be inspected again next year. It's on a 2-year inspection cycle. So hopefully we won't have any major repair work done. And kind of as we go through these slides, I'm going to take you through the seasons basically. So that was winter. This is getting into the summertime. We had a new playground installed out at Coon Fork Park, which has been a very popular addition out there. Tons of people have provided good comments on it, and there's kids on it all the time. Has a zip line feature on it, which the kids really like, and it was a really nice addition to that park, and the day side near the beach is where it's located. Then we got into the fall. We had that large rain event in September, which caused a lot of damage throughout the county forest. ATV trail system, snowmobile trail systems. You can see some of these pictures show some of that damage. These repairs that we did on these areas that were washed out took probably about 3 to 4 weeks of man hours to fix them. So that consumed a large chunk of our work schedule throughout the month of October. And then kind of getting into winter, this highlights the snowmobile trail program. This is a bridge that was installed. Again, this is on private property, but it's a program that the county manages and oversees. This is a bridge that was put in near the Brown Hut Tavern, and very nice bridge. Everybody was happy with that, and it's another good relationship that we have with the department, with the user group, the Snowmobile Association, also private side of the landowner there. Some of the other highlights of other projects that we got in last year that are not, I don't have pictures on all these, but at Coon Fork we added a new ranger residence building out there, which was a major upgrade from the old travel trailer that was out there. At Tower Ridge we did some horse trail improvements out there. We added a watering station, a manure bunker, and a hitching wall out there, which has been used pretty well and received well by the horse riding community. We added a new canoe launch at Harstead Park and did some canoe launch work throughout the county at some of our landings that are on the Eau Claire River. That was a project that was identified as a high priority during our outdoor recreation plan that we revised in 2015. We did some painting throughout the park system, which sounds kind of minor, but these were pretty major painting jobs in very large buildings that we did have contracted out. And then we did some parking lot improvement at Lowe's Creek Park and LL Phillips, which are, you know, they had no base there. They're just muddy, sandy areas. So now they at least have a firm surface where people can park a car and not worry about getting stuck. And the final project that I'm going to talk about just for a minute is a planning project that we worked on in 2016 and actually just wrapped this up here a few weeks ago with the committee approving the plan, was the Lake Altoona master plan for the park down there. This was a 2-year project that we worked on. Again, a lot of the work was done in 2016, the planning and the meetings and going over these things and reviewing them. This is a plan that I would like to show to the full board sometime in the near future. Whenever I can be put on an agenda, I'd like to go through that plan with you guys and show you some of the details of it. It's a pretty exciting plan and hopefully something that we can really take a serious look at. So that's everything that I got for you. I didn't want to take too much time, but kind of hit the highlights there. So if anybody has questions.
Great, thanks so much, Mark, appreciate it. Questions, I see Supervisor Beckfield.
Am I working here?
Oh, okay, Josh. Oh, no, Mark. You're right.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
With that flood we had, and it was rather substantial, and a lot of people had it, in Lake Altoona, did we lose a lot of the dredging that we took in there? Has anyone done a study to see how much refilled in at the lake? Because I'm hearing that the upper part of the lake is, I'd like to hear a report from somebody
Sure.
who actually was out there.
Right, and I do remember at the time asking those questions. I don't remember what the exact report was. Ayers and Associates did the surveying work out there on that, and I believe after the storm, what they told me was that there was not significant sediment filled in there. So Whether that still remains the case now today, I don't know, but at the time they told me that it didn't fill in significantly. I can't really quantify that for you though. I can try to find an answer to that for you.
It would settle a thought in my head that was shared with me by other parties. Okay, that we spent a lot of money, and when are we gonna have to do it again? And I hope we don't. I hope you're right.
Right.
Okay, so you can follow up and get back.
Yep,
to-
I will.
Just get back to the administrative office and they can get something.
I'll get an answer. Okay.
Okay. Supervisor Anton.
Question about the drawdown of our resources. We're at a high level now, considering the possibility we may remain there or maybe we'll drop off. How does that cutting affect the total resources that we have? Will we have to drop off in the future in order to maintain? Are we growing as fast as we're cutting?
Yep.
I don't quite know how to express that question, but if you get the gist of what I'm referring to.
I believe so. Sure. Each year we have an annual allowable harvest, which is a level that is set by the county and it's approved by the DNR. And typically that amount is around 1,000 acres that we're allowed to cut on the county forest. So if you figure it's a little over 50,000 acres, it's about 2% of the forest we might cut in one year. The reality of that is it's usually around 700 to 800 acres that are cut. So the rate that we are cutting at, we are actually growing more timber per year than we are cutting. I know that that is a question that we've reviewed before in committee meetings. Again, I don't have those figures with me, but we are actually growing more timber per year than we are cutting. And looking forward into the future, we always will be realistically around that same mark, around that 1,000 acres a year. So you won't see any years where, we might try to cut 2,000 acres or anything like that. It'll always be plus or minus a couple hundred acres, about 1,000 acres.
And do you replant, or how does the reforestation occur?
Yep, we replant the pine species, red pine and some jack pine sites we've replanted. We replanted about 90 acres or so 2 years ago. Last year we did not replant anything, and then in 2018 we're going to be planting about another 40 acres or so of red pine. So as we final harvest some of the higher quality red pine sites, we do replant those. That had been something that had not really been done a lot in the past 10 to 15 years, but now we're getting that into our budgeting process and making sure that we do that when we have those stands that need to be reforested. The other species, the aspen species, which makes up a large component, that regenerates naturally through cutting, through sprouting. The oak species regenerate naturally as well. Sometimes we do go in and we have a bulldozer with a big rake on it that we scuff up the surface so the acorn drops into the soil better. So we do scarification on some of the better quality red oak and white oak sites that we have in the county forest.
The last question, do you have a problem with deer affecting the regrowth?
Right now, as the deer population currently stands, deer are problems in certain areas. I don't want to say they're a problem across the whole 52,000 acres, but we definitely have areas where deer are browsing the county forest pretty heavily. As I mentioned, we replanted some of those sites a few years ago, and we're talking red pine. We've got rows out there where the deer just went straight down the rows and ate tops right off of all the trees. So people that say there aren't deer out there, they don't, I don't agree with that. I mean, there's plenty of deer. There's no shortage.
Thank you. Josh, any other questions for Josh this evening? None, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
You and your staff, appreciate the good work. And our last oral report, but not least, last but not least, Sheriff Ron Kramer. So, welcome, Sheriff.
Good evening.
Good evening to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and County Administrator, for giving us the 20th opportunity to address the county board on an annual basis. You know, the first question that people ask us is, you know, how are you doing on your budget? And I'm proud to say that this last year we came in at 95% of the budget. We didn't overspend, but that's what managers do. Captain Brzezina is here in the audience, and we had a number of projects that we had federal money, state money. Dan did a 4-year project on our range, and I'll boast a little bit. Dan did an awesome job out there of a brand new 200-meter rifle range, new handgun range, and this year in our project, our capital, we're looking at putting movable targets out there. Wisconsin State Patrol, along with us, local law enforcement agencies have access to it. We have a new training room out there. We have to annually qualify with our handgun. It's a new state standard that was put for law enforcement. Proud to say that we use that range quite often in conjunction with our Fall Creek partners. The city of Fall Creek has been very good with us, helping us with equipment needs and so forth at the range and keeping that up. If you haven't been down there, we've had a committee meeting, and I remember having a committee meeting down there, and it was, I think, one of the quickest committee meetings that we've had in the history of law enforcement. We had a committee member that was deathly afraid of mice, and we were passing around photos of our decaying range house, and there was a mouse in one of the pictures, and she looked and she said, "Is there mice in this place?" I move that we move this project forward. Unanimous decision, and we move forward from there. So we have a lot of mice that we're keeping for other projects as we move forward. One of the things that, another question that comes up, how are you doing on your permanent, salary permanent and overtime? We were below in 16 and spending because we had vacancies in our jail facility in the security division, but we were over on our overtime, but through a wash of benefits and so forth, it came out about even. So I will tell you as we're moving forward that we're right about where we need to be from a financial standpoint of salary permanent and overtime. We've had some cuts throughout the year, but we managed it. So again, coming in at 95% of your budget on $11 million budget is pretty darn good. But I need to thank the folks that I work with, our command staff, because we really do watch the way we spend. And come November, you know, we stop spending. We try to get all of our bills in to make sure that we're utilizing the taxpayers' money the most effective and efficient way we can. One of the things that I need to talk to you about tonight is our jail, and thank you. You have this chart on your desk. I'll have to take my glasses out to see the fuzzy chart. One of the things that you need to pay attention to is that green line right there. That's going to tell you that we're functionally, in 2017, we're functionally full operationally in our jail, 80% full. Now take some of the folks that have been here 15 years back. We'll go back in the time machine here a little bit. The DMG study came out, and we didn't have a lot of hard data at the time the DMG study was done, but our numbers were going up by 5, 6, 7% annually in the jail. Thanks to the CJCC, we've been able to slow that tide, and we have the people in our facility that we're afraid of. The people that we're not afraid of are deferred prosecution, they're out in the streets, and we have other programs within Eau Claire County that they're participating in successfully. Our concern is now we have the worst of the worst in our facility. And right now we have 7 vacancies in our facility for our corrections staff, and that was 15% of our working staff opening right now. We've been working with our HR director and their staff trying to find appropriate people without lowering the standard of correctional officers that we're looking for. The state corrections, they're hurting statewide. The last year, I think Captain Bredigan and I were at a function where they had 420 vacancies in their 17 institutions in the state of Wisconsin, and we're trying to find appropriate people for corrections staff. And they lowered theirs to some people that had misdemeanor conviction. We don't want to be there. We have a good quality workforce in Eau Claire, and so I will tell you as county board members, citizens in Eau Claire, that if you know good people that have been laid off or displaced and they have a clean record, refer them to us. We'd like to know, we'd like to have our local people. We've had farmers, we've had electricians, and we've had carpenters that were displaced that we hired and have worked out really, really well because they had great common sense working in an institution and working with people. So again, we are looking at for people. We're working with human resources to try to cut that tie, because every time we lose a correctional officers, that means other correctional officers on their days off are being ordered in. It's being stressful on them. In our last two, we said, where are you going? And both of them said day jobs, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. We want our family life. So that's pretty difficult in the 24-hour operation to find people that are willing to work the shifts, the holidays, the birthdays, anniversaries, and so forth. And we recognize the firefighters, law enforcement, and a lot of people do work in our community 24/7 and are expected to be there and show up for work. So we're working on that diligently, and I'm glad Jill has given us a lot of good information and keeps us up to date what's going on even in the private sector. So we're not the only ones hurting at this point, but we've got to look at recruitment and retention, and we may have to pay more. We may have to look at protective status, and right now there is a bill in the legislature. We've been following it for the last couple of years, trying to get the legislature to do something. And you folks sent a resolution down to Madison, Wisconsin Counties Association, in support of that protective status for counties. Now it's just trying to figure out with Wisconsin Retirement and some of the other interested parties, how do we facilitate in the state of Wisconsin and make them, our probation agents, our protective status, our folks that are in our state facility jails, our protective status. We have rangers in the DNR that watch the fire towers that are protective status, but our own correctional officers are not within our facility. And that is a concern for us at this point. But we have to work with it and be reasonable and find the right folks. With that, I will tell you that 18 is going to be a challenge for us, because I expect that number, this green line, to continue to go up. Methamphetamine, we don't have a curb on the methamphetamine yet. I just talked to Brian O'Keefe from DCI today. They're offering us up a meth trailer to contain the methamphetamine when we find it, when we find the production labs. We've got the D&E working with us with our 6-county drug task force. We're doing all the partnerships we can to try to identify the people that are bringing it in. I think you'll see on the news that some of the people that were involved in robbing our local gas stations here were arrested last night. Meth was a definite issue with those individuals, and that's why they were going in and robbing places. And we had one case this last year of a meth individual that started burglarizing houses, work site. 150 different items were taken in a search warrant from that individual. So that made a lot of work. We cleared up a lot of cases, but this meth is driven. And thanks to our DA, that we are with a meth committee. We're working on, if these people catch several cases, we're sending them to be tested daily at the transitional center. If they come up dirty for the first time, we'll give some education, but the second time we may have to put them back in custody so that they're not catching more cases and committing more crime. So we have a dilemma here. Now we're starting to see the opiates, we're opiate deaths, and as a result of it, this year, I've talked with Catherine, and no surprise that our medical's going to go up by probably $124,000 in our current jail facility of the people we currently have. And the jail nurses that we have in our jail, we're competing with the nurses from Sacred Heart, Luther, and everybody else. And they've had a turnover, and as a sheriff, I never want to be hiring the jail doctor, the jail nurses. The liability is on the company that currently represents us. The same with our food company. The liability is off us as a county and on someone to make sure that they're following the law. So again, we've got some challenges coming up in 18. One of the things we don't have is a relief center like we had last time. The Huber Center, our block, we kept 15 to 16 inmates rather than sending them to Dunn County or Chippewa County. Captain Brazino has been in contact with both of them, and they're experiencing the same problem. They're down in the numbers of people, and they can probably take 10 people right now for us. But we had up to 36 people out in other county jails, and that availability, we may have to go 2-3 counties to find bed space available. There's another thing in the legislature that we're looking at and following as sheriff statewide, that the State Department of Corrections is looking at sending some of the people back with 60 to 90 days left on their prison sentence back to their home county where they were sentenced from. So we're working, watching Wisconsin Counties Association, trying to watch that legislation, because that pushes that cost back on us, and we don't know if the state will entertain the medical for those 60 to 90 days. We may have someone with a medical problem coming back, and we're going to have to deal with that through our medical facility. So again, there are challenges within the Sheriff's Department. We've talked about the jail, the operation of our security services and the courts is working well. We've, knock on wood, we haven't had the major incident in our courts where screening has to be done. But that's an issue where if you have one incident, we'll be back and have that discussion again of what do we do? Can we afford it? And some people say, well, we've got to find the money to secure our courts, the court workers, and the public that come in and observe. In our detective bureau, we have 3 detectives. They've done a phenomenal job, and this last Sunday we were invited up. The Rusk County Sheriff invited us up for a recognition supper. Our detectives worked on the Danny Glaze homicide case, which is still pending, in appreciation of all the work that our detectives did in that case. We used a drone for the first time of an overview on that particular case to show where the person had been out in the field. Our technology, and thanks to the county board and for authorizing our forensic computer lab person, he put together the car video and the 911 call, overlaid them, and there's no doubt that we've got the right person because of the computer work, the identification of the vehicle, and the arrest of the individual. And the individual, our armored vehicle that was used that night, we had 5 armored vehicles up there for one person. The guy had a high-powered rifle, and he was looking to kill cops. And so I remember having a conversation with people when we first brought one of the military armored vehicles into Eau Claire County. And I said, if we can find a way to get a civilian model, we certainly will. And we accomplished that this last year. We had a federal grant that allowed us to allocate our MRAP to Waukesha Police Department, where that is a rescue vehicle. And if you've watched the hurricane situation, what were they using? The MRAPs, because they're high water vehicles. They were in as a rescue vehicle, not as a tactical vehicle, but as a rescue vehicle. You and I paid for that vehicle through our federal monies and being reutilized in a rational form to help people and the storm survivors. So again, we're forward looking, and that's where we want to be. So again, from our patrol division, we're holding our own out there. We've got good equipment. We're maintaining an excellent fleet out there. And I think with that, if I will close, I don't want to get into the deer that Josh were talking about because we've had a number of car deer crashes. And I'll tell you, we have deer in the county, and Altoona Auto Body and some of the local auto body places have fixed them for us. But I want you to know that you're invited anytime you want a tour through your jail. We have one cell block left up there to finish out. Originally, that would have been a $3.5 million cost. I have no idea. I would venture to say it'd be about a $5 to $6 million cost now to finish that out. But that would be a direct supervision block, and about 96 people, Dan? 96 people additional. And I do believe that within the next couple of years, we're going to have to look at building that out. Otherwise, our only resource at this point would start to ship people, and we were at $42 when we're shipping people, and now it's going to be $47 to $52 per day for an inmate in another facility. But these are people that are being revoked. They've had 2, 3, 4 chances. They have court hearings. They have felony records that we would be shipping out. They have a court process in front of them. Probably, and I'll give an estimate, that 45–50% of our people that are sitting there have some sort of probation hold violation. And we have to hold those people. So again, we have some challenges in front of us, but I'll guarantee our staff is up for the challenge, and with the help of our county administrator and you folks, we'll work through it. I have no doubt that we'll come out on a positive end. And it'll be the most cost-effective way we can handle human life. But again, it's every day when I come into work, I've got a list that I want to get completed, and I never get to it because there's a forest fire over here, or we have a situation in the courts or the jail that come up. So it's made an interesting 20 years so far. So again, I appreciate your collaboration and cooperation with our department as we move forward.
Thank you so much, Sheriff. We appreciate that. Questions, Supervisor Clark?
Thank you. I remember when we were planning the jail, somebody who was opposed to the jail said, if you build it, they will come. They were right. There's nothing, unless somehow we get a miraculous cure for methamphetamines, we're going to be in this situation. I'm just glad we do have some space available. I would also like to say thank you. I can't count how many times over the last years we've heard a crisis call for the jail, for staff, for other things. And somehow we can always count on the sheriff's office staff to pull through and do the job and get it done correctly. And I thank you.
Thank you. We manage crisis, and it's how you manage a crisis at the end of it. And we often debrief. How did we do? We grade ourselves, if you will, because anytime we're done with a tactical situation, how did we do? When we make an arrest and sit down with a DA, our outcomes always are at sentencing to find out how did our folks operate and serve the public. And I think that's a benchmark that I look at. I'm proud of our staff and our supervisors that every day we come in that we have some difficult situations, but we'll work through them. And that's part of good people. And I think Dan and our supervisors that come in, and they're my eyes and ears, and I'll get a text in the middle of the night, just so you know, Sheriff, something came up. But today we need to stay connected, and we need to have these discussions, honest and frank discussions. I visited Pierce County when I worked undercover, and they're going to build a jail, and that was 20 some years ago. And today They just opened their new jail. But I'm proud of the fact that we were able to work with them, and they came up and took a look at our facility and talked with our staff and said, in your facility, what works well and what doesn't? And we were able to share it. And our facility now is being replicated in North Dakota by 2 sheriffs sharing resources. They're using our same design because our staff picked it apart from the architects, and we have an excellent flow. But I invite you to take the time. If you want a personal tour, Captain will always take you through and show you your jail and some of the positive things and some of the areas that we're trying to improve on. But I thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Wilkie.
Sheriff, a couple things. First of all, some comments, and then I'd like to see if you can agree, disagree, or want to modify it anyway. You know, we've done alternatives to incarceration, and it's been an excellent step, correct step. Consequently, as Judge Barlin has put it, in the past, we put people in jail because we're angry at them or scared. Well, the ones that we're scared of should be in jail. The ones we're angry at, not so sure that that was good practice in the past. We've been very successful, in my opinion, with alternatives to incarceration. Consequently, for lack of better words, I'll say that we now have the worst of the worst in our jail. Consequently, meth has come along the way, and it's not the same as it was 30 years ago working with drunks in the jail, and that was the alcohol was primary there, but now it's meth, and the meth having a big difference that I'd be interested in what you have to say. And then also, I'd be interested in knowing the number of current vacancies we have for correctional officers, and did any of those leave to positions that have protective status?
Let me agree with you on several counts. Meth is going to continue to be a problem. As Catherine mentioned, there's no silver bullet for meth. There's no drug that will keep people off from meth. It's within themselves, it's within treatment facilities. There are treatment facilities available that will work on that. It's an expensive process because you have to get them healthy first before you can treat them, because there are definite medical problems. We have 7 vacancies currently. And yes, people did leave for protective status, whether it was through probation and parole, whether it was in another county. We had a person who was promoted to a sergeant. We're kind of proud of that fact. We trained him and he went someplace else. But again, protective status did weigh in, but it's that Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and it's the family that we're finding that people, you know, when you have young children and the child gets sick, one of the parents has to take care of them. And I have somebody sitting in here tonight that I'm very, very proud of, because she was our top pick for a sergeant many years ago, and Colleen said, nope, family first. I don't want the promotion yet because I have a day shift and I can pick my schedule. But we talked her into her boys are pretty big now, and she's now a sergeant with us. But we've been able to retain Colleen in the field, and she does an excellent job promoting corrections, and she teaches corrections. But again, it's a difficult job because what we're hearing from the folks is, as you said, Jerry, the worst of the worst. If you're dealing with them 24/7, if you're in our high-risk block, and all you've got is troubled people with mental health issues, you're putting a lot of time into those individuals to keep things calm so that there's not fights, so that they're not creating more criminal activity while they're here in our jail.
Thank you, Sheriff. One follow-up question that you may not be able to answer, and nobody has answered it for me yet. Why can other counties provide, 16 of them, I believe, protective service, and we can't?
We had protective status here when they were deputies. And they had the availability to go out on the road or stay, or if they were out on the road, to come back into the jail as a deputy. More hours of training, 17 weeks of training now for a full deputy sheriff versus 4 weeks for a correctional officer. But besides the 4 weeks of training, we do field training in the jail like we do in patrol to make sure. When I first started here, Jerry, somebody handed me the keys and said, if you have any problems, call the sergeant at night. I was like, there's only 2 of us on. But we're dealing with a lot of alcohol. But now they're dealing with psychotic behaviors. A lot of them are psychotropic medication that they're taking. They're acting out. We've had officers injured trying to maintain a civil jail in there. You're going to have arguments. And what happens is, in the world of drug dealing, you know, we kind of know who their friends are, but we don't know who to keep them away from if they've cooperated with law enforcement and we put them in the wrong cell block and the fight breaks out. We don't learn until the end of it what really transpired. So dealing with human life, there's always that risk that somebody's going to get hurt. And we see, when we did a study before we used tasers in the jail, we were having a lot of deputies off with shoulder injuries. They were attacked, and now, you know, we're giving them a little bit of protection. We built that new jail to protect not only the inmates, but the people that work there. So again, you know, we've got a great facility, but we just have to find the appropriate people that will spend a career in corrections.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Supervisor Smyer.
Sheriff, referring to the days that Supervisor Clark referred to, prior to the building of our jail, those are the days in which we were shipping inmates to other counties. And my understanding is at that time, those counties, some of them, began to build capacity to serve our inmates. Now in this situation, have those counties experienced something similar to what we're seeing, so that whatever increased capacity they have has now been taken up by the meth epidemic, and therefore, when we come to the point where we might have to use out-of-county placements more or again, they won't be there, which will compound the problem?
That's a great analogy right there. Okay. Because Chippewa, Dunn have a meth issue, Barron County, Polk, St. Croix, so we'd have to drive a long ways. But some of the counties are both experiencing meth, heroin, and the opiate problem also. So again, it's going to make it harder for us, and that's why we've notified Catherine, we've notified our law enforcement committee of what are our options, and we've discussed them briefly with them, but they're limited.
I have a follow-up. One of the things I'm picking up from your comments about the meth epidemic is that it's really almost impossible to do treatment. What you're actually doing, I think, is trying to control the dangers and so on. So my question was, is there anything going on in your jail that provides any kind of help in regard to the meth addiction?
We have programming if they're willing, if they'll take that first step to say, I've got a problem.
That's the key thing.
Yeah, they've got to, but most of the people that we've talked to, Supervisor Smyer, have told us, and correctional officers, it's a good thing you kept me in jail, because if I get out, I'm going to do the same thing I was doing. I can't fix myself. None of my family members will let me in. They've burned all their bridges to family and other resources, and some of them are living on the street. Some of them are continuing to burglarize and get money, go to the pawn shop, get the money, and go to their dealer. It's a constant cycle. I know working undercover when in '96, standing out in the middle of a cornfield in Dunn County at 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's cars coming and going out of the dealer's house. And I'm thinking, man, I can't stay up this long. I mean, the overtime was killing us, but it's something that is been around, and it's going to stay around until people they stop using the drug. But it's very difficult. It's a 800-pound gorilla on their back.
How long do these people remain in the jail?
It really depends on the disposition of the case, how long the DA's office can move the case along, and how many cases that they've caught. And one of the things I had mentioned too is our district attorney, we have the meth committee, we've taken a look at best practices about putting people out on bond. And while they're out on bond, they may have to go down to the transition center and be tested every day. That accountability has worked for our alcoholic people, but we're trying to find a way for the drug addicted people that we have some accountability while they're out on bond. You know, a judge on a drunk driving case can tell you, okay, during the disposition of this case, don't drink. I don't want you in any bars. If we really looked in the bars, we'd find a whole bunch of violations there for court-ordered violations, but we don't have the staff to do that. But it really is, with the treatment programs, we have treatment programs available, but they're costly.
Supervisor Condon.
We recently approved a request for a new court. Does the scheduling court affect this at all? In other words, if we have another court, would the amount of time incarceration, would they be able to flow through the system quicker and reduce the number of days in your jail?
If you have the judge, the district attorney, assistant district attorney assigned to the court that can move the cases along, we've tracked cases in our county and in Dunn County. And when I worked undercover, some of the cases in Dunn County took 2 years to process. Yes, the answer is you can move cases along quicker, but there are time elements, there are evidence issues, briefs, all of that, but you need staff to help that court. So again, you know, it's just to keep up with the flow.
Are we falling behind?
Yes,
Okay.
we are. The DA's office, there are some cases that are sitting that they haven't prosecuted yet because of a prioritization of some of the other higher cases. And a lot of them deferred prosecution on some of the cases that in other counties would probably be felony cases, but we've been able to defer those, which has helped in some of our jail population also.
But does that mean that our jail population could be lowered if we could smooth out the process more?
It's a tough one. That one, I don't want to look in the crystal ball and tell you that we could lower it, because the amount, it depends on how much availability is there, how much solvability of each case that we have, the criminal cases sitting out there. But it's a tough one.
Supervisor Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the sheriff. If you recall, I think it was about 8 or 10 years ago, we did a meth summit. It was, at the time, we brought all kinds of social workers, law enforcement, educators together, and it seemed to me at the time, it worked at trying to go from the prevention angle because meth was so terrible. Have you thought about maybe doing some resources? Maybe it's time to do some more of that with extension of the programming?
We just did one earlier this year. The meth committee decided we'd do one Chippewa Valley Technical College, and sorry to tell you that there was less than 50 people that attended. And to try to get them there, it was done in the evening. We laid out. We had Detective Coit from the Eau Claire Police Department to show an interactive video of what a meth house looks like for deck children, drug-endangered children. Drugs laying around, powdered meth laying on where the kids right next to the food. So again, the deck program, and I'll throw a little advertisement in here at this point. We have that the Fireball, the Fireball run is coming here, and they're going to support the deck program. We'll have that's coming up here with the 25th. The weekend of the 25th. So come down and take a look at that, our deck program people, Don Henning, some of our detectives, have went out in the community and got backpacks for the displaced kids when we take them out of the house, so that they have a toothbrush, a backpack, some clothing, so that they're not empty when they leave the residence, because you don't want to take any of that clothing with the kids and start contaminating other areas. So again, it's a real challenge out there. And now we're starting to see powdered fentanyl, and the booby trap of the fentanyl of leaving it up above a door, and if law enforcement walks in and the fentanyl comes down, the powdered, if you don't have the antidote for fentanyl, an officer's going to die. So now we're talking about equipping our officers with the antidote as an emergency every search warrant they go on. So it's the days in 1975, law enforcement was so much easier. You know, carbon paper, one report form, and you were pretty good to go. But today is pretty complicated out there. So again, thank you for all you folks do for the community, and thank you.
I think we have one last question.
Okay.
That's Supervisor Bates.
Thank you so much. This evening I shared an email.
Is your light blinking? Mine looks like you're on. Is your light blinking on the base? Look at the base.
Janet.
Turn it on.
Janet.
Now it should be blinking.
No?
Now you're on. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. This evening I shared with you an email that I received a couple days ago. And it's for cannabis gummies. And the email says, without a prescription in all 50 states, healthiest, clinically validated, and lists a whole lot of personal kinds of issues that can be resolved by it. Also, a little note that says, better candy means bigger smiles. Speak to a candy expert. We're here to help. And it offers free samples. So if we think about whether or not this issue is over, we have a next generation of individuals who are now being exposed at a much earlier age to a substance that certainly can be a gateway substance. We will have individuals who say that might not be the case, but basically I brought the same email to our health department for the task force to be able to take a look at. But obviously, as a community, we really need to be working with our schools on the opposite end of this as well. There's no question that we have folks that are in serious, serious problems because of the use of all sorts of drugs. But if we don't make an effort on the other end of the spectrum, there really isn't an end in sight. And certainly when I look at this, it makes me angry. It makes me feel as though basically the individuals who profiteer on this type of thing certainly aren't thinking about the future of our children, and certainly not thinking about what we want to have as individuals who are functional in our society, workforce, and successful. We talk about STEM, how important it is in the development of our children. I'd like to stem the development of this.
We've been tracking the legalization of marijuana in our state. It's on the legislative docket this year. We had Sheriff Smith from Colorado, the Aurora area come in, and their drug driving is through the roof. People coming to work under the influence, driving. So the sheriffs in the state of Wisconsin are against. We've got so many substances out there that people are abusing, and this is another issue that the marijuana folks that are pro-marijuana, they're going to be hitting the legislators up at election time with a lot of money to talk about bringing them over to their side. And Colorado now is seeing gummy bears and some of this in their schools, and they don't know how to deal with it. So again, I would ask you and your folks to ask our legislators, you know, the question. We're still working on legislation for alcohol. Throw another substance in there, and then we'll have more problems. And what the sheriff from Colorado said, now what they're doing is anybody that's making money, mom and pop grow operations out there, they're being robbed because they know they have cash money, and so their crime is still going up as a result of all of this extra money in Colorado. So they said, be very careful as you move forward. So we've heard their message.
I would suggest we not move forward.
Yes.
Sheriff, thank you very much for your service, and to Captain Brazina and Colleen, Sergeant, forget your last name.
Castell.
Okay, thank you and all your staff, so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Moving on, you've got the contingency report in your document, or in your meeting materials, as well as some correspondence concerning rezoning and concerning Supervisor Willett's resignation that we'll get to momentarily. But I'll ask, actually I've got one announcement and I'll ask if there's others. The Sheriff mentioned it, the Fireball Run, that's coming this Saturday. On your desks is a little ticket information about it. There is a philanthropic aspect to it with the participants, and the organization that's benefiting is the Drug Endangered Children program, to get those backpacks so that when kids have to get removed from the home, they've got some basic materials and so on. And so it's 9 to 5 on Saturday at Phoenix Park, and then the start line where they head off to Rochester, Minnesota, I think is the next stop, is at 7 a.m., 7 to 9 on Sunday morning on South Barstow, and front page story in the newspaper this morning with more information. Let's see, Supervisor Lavelle has an announcement.
Thank you, Chairman Moore. After you do Bruce's resignation, that we're so sorry to see and leave, we do have some happy birthday and goodbye cupcakes over there, and I still think there's quite a few of them left, so maybe we can take a short break after this.
I think, why don't we keep moving, but folks should feel free to get up and get some punch and cupcakes.
Right. And another thing, I'd like to invite everybody from the county board, Unit 53 American Legion, would like to invite everybody to a veteran stand down at the Expo Center this Thursday, 21st, from 9 a.m. to 3. We're all invited. Opening ceremony is at 9:30. They're going to do the flag and the pledge and everything. And if you do come, wear your name tag. Come, and like I said, they're all invited. They'd like you to come out and see what's going on. So hope to see everybody there.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to announce that Beaver Creek Reserve is now 100% solar. Due to action that the Beaver Creek Friends Board took at their last meeting, every facility at Beaver Creek Reserve will now be powered completely by solar, which I think it really says a lot about our nature center and its commitment to reducing our carbon footprint and protecting the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements this evening? I see none. We'll move on to first reading of ordinances by committees, file 56.
To amend section 3.20.090 C2 of the code, compensation of other officials.
And we'll bring that back at our next meeting, October 3rd, file 62.
To amend section 4.09.035 of the code, highway winter maintenance reserve account.
Okay, I'll refer that to the Finance Committee. And first reading of ordinances, file 63.
Congratulating and commending Bruce Willett upon his dedicated service as an Eau Claire County Board Supervisor.
Is there any objection to taking this matter up under suspension of the rules? I see no objection. So the matter is before us. Any discussion? Supervisor Smyard, or that was just to do that? All in favor of that motion to congratulate Supervisor Willett, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that passes. Bruce, thank you very much. him to the podium if you would, please. While Bruce is coming up, I'll just say one of the things I really remember about his leadership that I think really has helped foster a great culture in this board. When he was chair, he said, "It's fine to disagree, but you need not be disagreeable." And when we look at the political discourse that's taking place at the federal, national level, state level, the incivility oftentimes, it appears, we are blessed to have here, I believe, on this board, a culture of civility, and that was really one of the legacies of many positive legacies of Bruce Willett. So I do have a certificate that you can hang in your new digs. I know you're moving out of the district. Eau Claire County, in recognition and appreciation for dedicated and valued public service to the citizens of Eau Claire County, as County Board Supervisors for District 20, Bruce Willett presented this 19th day of September 2017, signed by the chair and the vice chair. So congratulations, Bruce. Thank you so much. And why don't you come up and
Well, I feel most honored by this presentation. And I do want to say a couple of things. That I worked for counties for 20-some years before I moved to Eau Claire, which was my hometown. I went to Third Ward School here and graduated from Chippewa High, born in Rice Lake, so I'm kind of a northerner. But anyhow, during the time that I've been on the board, there have been 460 county board meetings. I've attended most of them, and they've always been fun at times, discouraging at times, but always stimulating. And I just want to say that I've met in my term here some of the finest people I've ever known in 92 years of life on the board. And they have shared with me some of their ideas and certainly shared their love and concern. So I'm so happy to have been on the board as one of the highlights of my life. Then I do want to say something about politics being local. As Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local. It certainly is, and I always wonder what kind of qualities does it take to make a good county board member. I think number one, to me, is a sense of humor. And if you don't have that, you're going to have a tough time. And I think on top of that is the long-range view of things. So when we vote on issues, we think we're voting for our grandchildren. I had a child here tonight who's a student at the university majoring in climatology, but he had to get back to study, I guess. Oh, there he is, back there. Oh. He went back to be with his grand. That's he's grand in a couple of ways, and that's Paul Willett, and I'm so glad that he came. And then the long, enduring, and trouble-bearing sometimes wife of mine is here, and she's 61 years, put up with me, and always had a smile on her face, and always a cheerful spirit. So I'd like to have her stand up, and her friend Jeannie Sargent. And I think one other thing that is a requirement to be a member of the board is you have to think not just with your mind, but with your heart. And if you don't vote with both of them, you're going to get into a lot of trouble. You can see tonight how some of the actions of the Sheriff's Department, it's tough love. But love is there, and the planning and thinking through of the issues is so important. And then finally, I'd just like to say that you're looking at one of the most fortunate human beings that walked the face of the earth. I really feel that way. I was educated in Eau Claire School District and the Chippewa Falls School District in the University of Wisconsin. And I survived World War II. And when I survived, I didn't do anything heroic, but I was drafted as an 18-year-old. But I had a little shocking experience that kind of led me to other paths after I was discharged during World War II. I was riding a bus in Oklahoma, and I, an ignorant little 18-year-old kid from northern Wisconsin. And I went on the bus, and I went and sat down in the back of the bus. And the bus driver pulled up to the curb and said, "Soldier, either get off of that seat and get here to the front or get off." And I got off because I was kind of puzzled. But that was kind of the beginning of my concern for persons of color and who happen to be religiously different than me in other ways. So I sort of led me into the whole concept of there's a lot of inequalities, and county boards can have a lot to do with helping in eliminating that through the practice of love and teacher. But another rich experience is I have 3 kids who are all children, and who are all teachers, not children, but on every level of education, primary, secondary, and university. And my grandson, I have one grandson, and he's grand in lots of ways. He's majoring in climatology here at the University in Eau Claire. So I'm, again, so fortunate of having these, what in my opinion are some of the best children I've ever known. So finally, I just want to say that it's to live is to love, not in a mushy way, but in a kind way. And to love makes life worth living. So thank you. As fellow members of the county board, it's been a real privilege and a joy to share an opinion occasionally, maybe some in error and maybe not. But along with our successes, I think Eau Claire County has taken quite a progressive move. And I always think, well, who are your heroes? And I know Gaylord Nelson is one of my heroes because he was concerned not just with people, but he was concerned with the environment. And that has been one of my pets, of course. And that's why I think when we vote, we have to think for our grandchildren so that there's enough nature left for them to enjoy and appreciate. And I've been fortunate to be on committees that help me express that. So thanks again, and I'll see you sometime.
Thank you, Bruce, so much for your service and for your truly inspiring remarks here this evening. Moving on to some legislative items this evening. We'll start with file 44.
This ordinance makes changes to the county code 2.90 as part of the strategic plan process.
May I have a motion, please? Motion by Supervisor Leary with a second by Supervisor Catlin, and an explanation by Supervisor Bates to start with, and then I'll recognize Supervisor Beckfield for a minor amendment. But Supervisor Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This particular review is pertinent to the retention of records, and it covers sections 1 through 15. The changes here reflect changes that are current administrative code provision or changes in the statutory provision, and those not previously included in this chapter. updates to the church, and also it includes updates to the current state standards. Interesting enough, the one thing that really stood out for me was the change for the retention of union contracts and keeping those records from 100 years cut back to 50. So that's progress. That's potentially what we would be doing within this ordinance, and I believe there's one change.
Thank you so much, and I'll recognize Supervisor Beckfield.
There is an amendment that on page 1, line 28, there's actually a housekeeping error under the retention column. 2 words were advertently dropped out. Sometimes when you take a Word document or an Excel document, you go to print it, it'll scrunch it and kick something off. Everybody's kind of aware of that. The 2 words that were inadvertently dropped are closed, and it clarifies the meaning of that column.
No.
It's a page 21, yep.
Right,
Okay.
line 28.
And that's a motion to amend. Is there a second to that motion? Supervisor Smyer. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion to amend, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, we're back to the main motion as amended. Any questions or discussion on that? I see none. If you take your keypads and vote, please. And the motion is, it's file 44, to amend certain sections of section 2.90 of the code concerning records retention as amended. And let's see, Supervisor McKinney, if you,
It's not working.
let's see. Aye or no, and then confirm. There we go. Thank you very much. That motion passes unanimously. File 47.
This ordinance makes changes to the county code in Title 4, 17, and 18 as part of the strategic plan process.
Looking for a motion for adoption. A motion by Supervisor Henning, second by Supervisor Olson, and an explanation as needed. Supervisor Bates.
Thank you. This only addresses legal citations and the repealing of footnotes and one typo. So the one thing that should be noted here is that there will be much more purview of this whole section by planning and developing in the time to come.
Thank you for the explanation. Any questions or discussion on this matter? I see none. It appears you're ready to vote, so please do so. Concerning the motion, it's file 47 to repeal the footnote reference to Title 4 of the code. And that's adopted unanimously. File 53.
To amend section 2.44 of the county code as part of the strategic plan process.
Looking for a motion. Motion by Supervisor Cronk, second by Supervisor Lavelle, an explanation by Supervisor Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, this is the updating of the department division responsibilities of the Planning and Developing Department, and explains a lot of the provisions that we're looking for even in individuals that we are hiring as to what their experience and such should be.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions? I see none, so please vote. File 53, the motion is to amend section of the code as described. Let's see, it's on discussion now. Just one moment here. Oh, there we go, okay. And it's adopted unanimously. And last item under administration is file 61.
Granting an easement to Eau Claire Energy Cooperative for electrical service at the Beaver Creek Reserve.
I have a motion, please. Motion by Supervisor DeLuca, second by Supervisor Schroffnagel, and an explanation by Supervisor Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In redoing the parking lot at Beaver Creek Reserve, There is a need to relocate an electric transformer and establish a new service line to Beaver Creek Nature Center. The Eau Claire Energy Co-op provider is requesting that Eau Claire County grant them an easement to accomplish this move, and a 15-foot wide strip from service box to the transformer along a mutually agreed line is what they're requesting.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions on this? I see none, so please vote on this motion to grant an easement to Eau Claire Energy Cooperative for electrical service at Beaver Creek Reserve. And that's adopted unanimously. Moving on to file 55.
Abolish one FTE Children's Court Services Director position, grade T, and create one Children's Court Services Supervisor position, grade P.
May I have a motion, please? Motion by Supervisor Olson, second by Supervisor Smyer, explanation by Supervisor Clark, and then Bates as needed. So Clark, from Human Resources.
Thank you. There will be an amendment coming. This was presented to the Human Resources Department Committee and it was approved. But I would like to move an amendment, if I may.
Sure, so we'll come back to the explanation, but we'll take up amendment number 1 that's on your desk and offered by Supervisor Clark. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Supervisor Mortimer. So now we'll just focus solely on amendment number 1 that's on your desk. Supervisor Clark.
What this amendment does, basically, it removes the language that would create an additional position. So it basically, then we're left with the resolution which abolishes the one position and moves some people around. I'm trying to find this on my screen. Let's see. Oh, there it is. There it is. I said at the Human Resources Committee meeting, our staff is flexible and is fluid. And this is one of those instances where the decision is made that the original resolution created a position that Human Services deems at this point unnecessary. And so if you take the amendment and compare it to the whereases and everything on the original resolution, striking on lines 4 and 5, creating one Children's Court Services Supervisor position, grade P, and then on page 1, line 14, insert another whereas. There's a vacant position that can be filled with Children's Court Services Director, which will be titled Children's Court Services Manager.
And let me just interrupt for a moment. The amendment says page 1, which is correct. In our meeting packet, we're looking at page 36.
Okay.
Okay.
And then on page 1, that same page, line 15, insert abolishing after 4. Strike $24,191 and insert $123,532, which means that that is budget savings of $123,500. Basically this goes back. We're just abolishing a position. We are not creating a new one. So I urge your support of the amendment. If you have any questions, Diane Cable is here and has said that she would gladly answer questions.
Yeah,
as
both,
needed.
both Diane and Rob Fadmis are still here. Discussion on the amendment. Supervisor, there was a second by Supervisor Bates. Yep. I believe Supervisor Bates second. Yep. So we do have a motion. Any discussion or questions? I see none. It appears you're ready to vote. So what's not, this isn't the main motion, it's amendment number 1 that's on your desk and as described by Supervisor Clark. So if you please vote on amendment number 1 at this time. And that is adopted unanimously. We're now back to the main motion as amended. And Supervisor Clark, you're going to continue with
Thank you.
background. Thanks.
This comes with, the resolution comes with the integration of the 2 departments, Children's Court Services and Human Services. And it's done for efficiencies and best practices. And I'm sure if you have questions about why this is being done or how it's going to work, Diane would be happy to answer them, and Colleen might also be able to answer. I'm sure she could.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. Supervisor Bates, do you want to add anything?
Not really. I think the explanation at the beginning of the meeting, talking about how this was coming about and why these changes are going to be implemented, the explanation I think was sufficient for action on this.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or discussion? I see none, so please vote. It's what's before us is file 55, abolishing a position of Children's Court Services Director position as amended. And that's adopted unanimously. Moving on to file 12.
Amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Lincoln.
May I have a motion, please? Motion by Supervisor Lavelle, second by Supervisor Cronk, and an explanation by Supervisor Gibson.
Thank you. This rezoning petition is to rezone 5 acres from AP Agriculture Preservation District to A2, and this is to allow construction of a single-family residence for a family member. And this has been reviewed by Planning and Development Committee. It went to the Lincoln Town Board. The Lincoln Town Board approved it. It fits in with the county's and the town's comprehensive plan, and the committee voted 4-0 to approve this.
Thank you, Supervisor Gibson. Any questions or discussion? I see none, so please vote on file 12, amending the zoning district boundary map for the town of Lincoln as described. Adopted unanimously. File 51.
Amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Clear Creek.
May I have a motion, Supervisor Willett, second by Supervisor Leary, and an explanation once again by Supervisor Gibson.
Thank you. This one here is almost identical to the last one. It's again to rezone 5 acres from agriculture preservation to A2 district to allow the property owner to sell the existing home and 5 acres of land and retain the adjacent property for agriculture uses. And this was reviewed by the Planning and Development Committee. It was reviewed by the Town of Clear Creek Board, and they voted to recommend approval. This also, again, fits in with the comprehensive plan for the county and for the town of Clear Creek, and we voted 4-0 to approve.
Thank you so much. Any questions for Supervisor Gibson or any discussion on this? Supervisor Stelgis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Because we've had two of these that are pretty similar, and I know that we've had other instances of this where we have land in agricultural preservation districts, and then someone wants to carve off a piece of property to build a home. I'm wondering if Matt, I thought Matt was still here, if he could talk to, I mean, does this tell us that we should be changing something as far as the rules of our district definition? It seems like,
Is there an objection?
something is not covering.
Is there any objection to Matt, the senior planner, responding to that question? I see no objection, so Matt.
I mean, if this automatically happens, why don't we just let it happen automatically and make it part of the zoning?
Great. Thank you, Chair Moore, Member Stelgis. As you know, agricultural preservation, we have adopted as a county a farmland preservation plan. Within that plan, those lands that are designated as being eligible for farmland preservation tax credits are zoned AP. That's what we call the farmland preservation certified district. In each case, what we look at is a number of things. There's actually 4 criteria that fall under the zoning ordinance that we look at. We look at the productivity of the soils, the historical productivity, as well as the capability of the soils. We look at adjacent land uses. We look at the, really, I guess the more intangible is what is the purpose here. So with the case that's before you, the Colleyville Dairy, they own extensive acreage, including their dairy facility. There's an existing home on the property. They wish to sell that home. In order to sell that, it needs to be sold as a non-farm residence. Now, the case that preceded this was for a family member. And that's always, I guess, as it goes through the townships and the county, that is one factor that we do kind of look at is this to split land off to sell to you and I who are not engaged in farming or helping the family or anything like that, no ties to the land. That's certainly a factor. Really, at the end of the day, how much land is being taken out of production? Now, going back to the Farmland Preservation Plan, that's adopted every 5 years, and the way DATCAP, the state agency that oversees it, looks at it is their threshold is 20%. So if we have 1,000 acres, they would say in the life of that plan, we should not rezone within that area more than 200 acres, for example. So under the Working Lands Initiative, there is an expectation that there will be some, primarily farmland preservation is about identifying, preserving the best lands. And within that, there's a whole range. I would say there's a lot of land within farmland preservation that is indeed more marginal. Those are going to be the lands that we're going to be, I think, more, we're not encouraging people to rezone, but we'd be more amenable to consider those. Now, when it falls right in, the middle of a great field, productive field, prime soils, yeah, we usually are going to tell them before they even get this far, we're going to tell them it's an issue. So I guess bottom line, it's not an issue of we never consider it, but we want to minimize it. When we look at I'm going to say 27,000 acres or plus or minus that are designated as ag preservation, if we're seeing 40, 50 acres a year, we're seeing some transition, but we're slowing it down, frankly, about as much as
I think maybe you missed my point. My point was, why wouldn't we do something to preclude us having to rezone all these? Why wouldn't we just say within AP, you can carve off 5 acres and it's okay to permit without having to go through this process? If we seems like we're doing it all the time, why not just make it easier?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think we do want to maintain as much control, frankly, as possible. We want to keep the bar as high as possible to make sure that there's a public process involved that involves public hearings and full consideration of as many people as possible. So to just sort of open the door and say you can do it automatically, certainly that would be a policy consideration that this body could consider and recommend. But frankly, I'm more comfortable with the fact that they do have to kind of go through a more intensive process because it is a big deal. I tell people we're as much in this county about telling people what they can't build, not their their pole shed, but keeping land preserved from development is as much a part of my job as encouraging the right land to be developed. And so I look at this as part of that, that we want to be very judicious and careful about what we what we allow in these areas.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Any other discussion on file 51? I see none, so please vote now. It's file 51. The motion before us is authorizing the amending of the zoning district boundary map for the town of Clear Creek as described in your meeting materials. And that's approved unanimously. File 20.
To amend section 16.30.529A1 of the code to be amended to read county forest use regulations.
May I have a motion, please? Motion by Supervisor Willett, with a second by Supervisor Gatlin, and an explanation by Supervisor Lavelle.
Thank you, Chairman Moore. A little history. At one time, we had no regulation on how long you could camp on a county forest, and some people would move in and never leave. So we went to a 7-day stay, and then they had to move for 7 days, and then we went to a 14-day with a $10 charge, and that way we knew where the people were camping in our forest. It paid for the paperwork. You know, they filled out a thing and we knew whereabouts they were camping. So during the deer season, mold season, some hunters came to one of our meetings and said, you know, we camp for 14 days, but the rut goes on probably twice that long, and why couldn't they stay an extra 14 days if they paid another $10 fee? And at that time, after the 14 days, they'd have to leave one day before they come back, but they were happy with that, so we, in the committee meeting, we changed it to allow them to do a 14-day and plus another 14 days for additional $10. And that's the way the surrounding counties do the same, contacting them. So it doesn't amount to a lot of money, probably $500 more. It helps out the hunters. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the explanation. Any questions for Supervisor Lavelle or anyone else from the committee or discussion? It appears you're ready to vote, so please do so now. On file 20, the motion is to amend section 16 of the code concerning county forest use regulation. That's adopted unanimously. Moving on to finance and budget, file 58.
Authorizing payment of vouchers over $10,000 issued during the month of August 2017.
May I have a motion, please? Motion by Supervisor Willett, second by Supervisor Dunning. It's on pages 77 to 78. Any questions about this month's vouchers? Supervisor DeLuca.
On page 78, let's see. Line 62.
Okay.
I just wanted to know why there is a settlement for the Chippewa Falls Area School District.
I believe that's, okay, Janet, we'll ask County Clerk Janet Lewis to answer that.
There's some parcels in Eau Claire County that have the Chippewa School. So on your tax bill, you know, you have the school portion, the county portion, so it's just their payment to them from the taxable properties in Eau Claire County.
And is that the people like north of Halley Lane that are in that Halley
I
area?
can't tell you, I know there's some in Seymour that have a Chippewa School. I think, and some in the city of Eau Claire have Chippewa School.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I see none, so please vote on the voucher. File 58, authorizing payment of vouchers over $10,000. Supervisor Anton, if you'd revote there, please, just didn't take for some reason. Thank you very much. That passes unanimously. File 64.
Initial resolution authorizing the borrow of not to exceed $9,750,000 and providing the issuance and sale of general obligation promissory notes therefore.
May I have a motion, please? Motion by Supervisor Conlon, second by Supervisor Clark. An explanation by Supervisor Dunning.
This follows the presentation we had at the beginning of the evening from the Ellers group talking about the sale of obligation of bonds to pay for the 2017 capital projects. This is the initial motion to bring it to sale, and on October 3rd, we'll come back with the final to sell, with approval to sell, or to buy the loans.
Thank you for the explanation. Any questions or discussion on this matter? Any questions or discussion? It appears you're ready to vote, so please do so. On file 64, motion authorizing borrowing of not to exceed $9.75 million and providing for the issuance and sale of general obligation promissory notes therefore. And that motion passes 24 yes and 2 no. Last is appointments.
Appointment of citizen members to the local emergency planning committee.
May I have a motion, please? Motion by Supervisor Olson, second by Supervisor Henning. This is for the LEPC as recommended by the Planning and Development Committee. Any questions on this evening's appointments? I see none, so if you please vote on that motion to authorize the appointments of LEPC members. That passes unanimously also. We are at the end of our agenda. Thank you, everyone. The meeting is adjourned, and best wishes, Supervisor Willett. Thank you.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and Eau Claire County. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.